Hello, all you wonderful behavior specialists. Welcome to our training on functions of behavior. We're going to give you a brief background of applied behavior analysis and then jump right into functions of behavior. Before we really look at behavior, let's just give a brief development of where we came from. So this is the development of applied behavior analysis. So we started off in the field of behaviorism, and this happened in the 1920s and 1930s with kind of the founder of behaviorism. His name was Watson. And this is really the philosophy saying that behaviorism is something that behavior is impacted by the environment, kind of moving away from just the classic philosophies in other fields of psychology. Then we moved on. You might be familiar with B.F. Skinner, and this is moving on to what we call the experimental analysis of behaviors. So in the 1930s all the way to current, there's a lot of research being done in different animal testings and how animals react to really just getting reinforced for behavior and getting punished for some certain behaviors. So the experimental analysis of behavior is a field starting in the 1930s that really gave us a lot of our techniques in our research and our evidence, our proof that what we're doing can work with animals. And then for us, we took those procedures that were used with the animals and applied them to humans. So there we have the applied behavior analysis field is what we're working in currently. And this, the founder of our field is, his last name is Fuller, and it's really a recent type of field that you're getting into. This is the 1950s to current. So basically starting off with behaviorism, the philosophy of behavior, moving on to the experimental or the development of the techniques using animals, and then applying those techniques systematically to problems of social significance and really try to make an impact on our society. So there's a whole outline of the field of psychology and how they relate. As you can see, behaviorism is fairly new to the game. Applied behavior analysis is not even in this particular chart. So we are coined observational psychology because we focus on what the person's doing and not what they're thinking, like maybe other areas of psychology. So there we are in the field of psychology, behaviorism. So let's just break down what our job is as a behavior analyst and a behavior technician. If we just look at the name behavior analysis, it gives us a pretty good clue. So, applied behavior analysis. First, let's talk about behavior. So, basically a person interacting with his environment, and there's some sort of change in space. Is the definition of an actual behavior. So through time, and part of that person changes the environment. So the definition really, just to get a good idea, is an organism or human's interaction with its environment that is characterized by a noticeable displacement in space, so that person is moving through time, and some part of that organism results in a measurable change for at least one aspect of that environment. And in applied behavior analysis, we're really looking at this measurable change. And this is where you take your data, and that's how we know that what we're doing is being effective, is through your data collection. Okay, so behavior, your interaction with the environment and space, causing some sort of change in the environment. Analysis is just the detailed explanation of the structure or the process of understanding something. Okay? And behavior analysis, if you stick those two together, it's a step-by-step approach to understanding human and animal behavior by studying their environment. Okay, so pretty straightforward. That is behavior analysis. So now that we talked about behavior analysis, we're going to put ourselves in a special niche that makes us really unique, especially awesome. All right, so this is the applied part that sets us apart from other behavior analysis. So what is applied behavior analysis? When we look at applied behavior analysis, remember behavior analysis is a step-by-step approach to understanding human and animal behavior by studying the environment. So that's the part of understanding behavior. Okay? When we talk about applied, we're looking at making a big change in somebody's life, and we're going to call that, very important term, socially significant. We want to make a socially significant change in somebody's life. So, therefore, if we put it all together, applied behavior analysis, it is the science in which tactics derived from the principles of behavior are applied systematically to improve socially significant behaviors, so important behaviors to somebody's life. And experimentation is used to identify that what we're doing is responsible for behavior change. So when you apply a technique that you're going to learn in applied behavior analysis, during your session, we want to measure the behavior and make sure that what we're doing is being effective by the change in your data. Applied behavior analysis has some of the most effective and simple tools for promoting change out there. And we're serious. ABA is not just helping people with autism, although we're very good at doing that. It's big, and it's the answer for a lot of society's problems. Just look at World Hunger Problem, for example. There's 12.9 people in the world that are considered unnourished. That's like 800 million people. There's about 28 to 32% of Americans that are considered obese and will suffer major health complications. We're looking at 36% of marriages that have currently are ending in divorce. And applied behavior analysis has designed some very effective tools that are cheaper than a lot of the other things that are being used out there that are effective, that can look at these problems and make progress. 2 million people suffering from homeless. That's 20% of those individuals suffering from mental illness. We can have our hands in that. Things like addiction, smoking, and alcoholism, applied behavior analysis is working in. Okay, and even, yes, global warming, we went there. ABA can change the way we produce waste, recycle behavior. Yes, it's pretty important stuff. So this is my hype slide to get you excited for the rest of our training today. So once you go ABA, basically can't go back. Learning and applying the things that you're going to learn throughout these trainings will absolutely change your life. Soon as starting on the next few slides. Okay, once you learn this stuff, you'll be a better learner, definitely a better teacher and a listener. It's going to affect your entire life. You're going to look at how you interact with your friends different. You'll be a better lover, a parent, better citizen, sibling, pet owner, controlling of your financials. You'll be wiser, friendlier, you'll be kinder, you'll be street smarter, and you will be stronger. So, this is you before ABA. This is you after ABA. All right, let's just move on. There are two different things that we can look at when we're looking at applied behavior analysis. One is looking at the form of the behavior. So this is what the behavior looks like. And your data collection training Data Collection 101 really looks at how to observe a behavior, measure it, and plot it so we can look at that data and make decisions on the client's programming. So the form of the behavior is what it looks like. Anyone can go into a home or school and see that a kid is yelling or crying or kicking or spitting. Now, we're going to today focus on function. So this is what kind of sets us apart in our field. We were looking at why the behavior occurred, and that's really the most important thing when we're looking at interventions. So our job is to investigate the function, and this is then going to guide our intervention plan. Alrighty then, let's make sure we know how life works. Starting off with, behaviors are a way for us all to communicate what we want. Everyone uses behaviors that have worked for them in their personal past experiences. So we only engage in behaviors that has worked for us in the past. You don't do behaviors that aren't going to get you what you need. Everyone uses behaviors that work quickly for them and that are easy for them to do. You're not going to spend any extra energy to get the same result. You're going to do the quickest behavior to get you what you need. If the behavior occurs often, someone is maintaining it. We're going to call that reinforcement. Reinforcement is at play. So if you are engaging in a behavior over and over again on a daily basis, or your client is engaging in a behavior over and over again, then we have to look at the environment and say, hey, somebody is giving into that behavior. Somebody is reinforcing that behavior. And we'll get more into that. We change our behavior according to our surroundings, according to the people around us, according to what building we're in, whether we're inside, outside, whether we're at a football game or a library. The next IBA is based on modifying the environment, and then that modifies our behavior. Okay, so we're making changes to our environment, and when those changes to our environment happen, we react different to that environment, and therefore our behavior is affected. Okay, find out who is reinforcing the problem behavior. So if there's a problem behavior happening in somebody's life, we have to look at who is reinforcing and who is giving in to that problem behavior. Okay, it's not like the kid needs to change. Okay, and this is going to be maybe a big modification of how you're thinking about problem behavior. It's not the child or the client that needs to change. It's us. It's the adults, it's the parents, it's the teacher. We as the adults need to commit to changing our behavior. And then, once we modify our behavior, which is in the environment, the client's behavior will then be modified. Our goal is to not just react to a problem behavior. Now, some classic examples include Pam skipped third period class the past 3 days and missed detention as well. So the principal gave her 3 days of suspension. Now, we don't like that Pam is missing class and missing detention, but giving her extra days off might just be making that problem worse. Reese got his books taken away because he obviously doesn't want to learn. He's not ready to learn, so we're going to take his work away. So that could be problematic. If you want attention, you can just walk with me down to the office and we can chat with the principal. So these are examples of behavior occurring and the adult reacting to them without looking at the function. Let's look at separating the form and the function. So problem behavior is not treated on its form, so what the behavior looks like. If you were treating problem behavior on its form, then you would just be chasing behavior all over the place, because as soon as you target one behavior, the client would change and start using a different behavior. You have to write a million different intervention plans for every behavior that pops up that person does. So here's a question for you guys. What would you tell a parent if they ask you, hey, what do I do if my child is screaming? What might you tell that parent? Well, you couldn't tell them much if you are getting the right answer. You'd say, I don't know, I can't tell you anything yet. Because looking at just screaming doesn't tell me anything. Because here, Peyton screams when his teacher asks him to get his work out. Ben screams when his mom is changing his little brother's diaper. Mark screams because his elbow is broken, and Russ screams because his grandma turned off the TV. So screaming doesn't really tell us anything. It's the reason or the purpose or what we call the function that we really need to get at. There's our $1 million word today, function. Function is just the purpose behind the behavior. It's usually a way for a person to communicate. So either to communicate, I'm thirsty, I need a drink, I'm hungry, or I want you to leave me alone, I don't want to do that activity right now, or I need some attention, let's hang out. We use behaviors that have worked for us in the past. So that's our learning history. And each one of us has a different learning history. And each one of the clients that you're going to work with or are currently working with have a different learning history. All the behaviors we do are learned over time through a process related to the function of their behavior. Another big term is efficiency. So making sure that we are using behaviors that are working quick and fast for us. We don't burn extra calories by doing extra work. If you have a teacher that says, hey, write a research project between 10 and 20 pages, you're probably not going to go towards the 20-page mark when you can just go towards the 10-page mark and get the same grade on your paper. So we don't do extra work for free. All the behavior that we choose are behaviors that are fast for us, don't burn that many calories, and are easy. There's our word function. It just means purpose of behaviors. So behaviors that are members of a response class, here's a new term for you. The word response class means that they have a common effect on the environment. Okay, so the response class, they have a common effect on the environment. So all of these behaviors, let's look at them. All these behaviors, screaming, biting, pointing, hitting, asking appropriately, maybe stealing, all those behaviors can function to get you something that you want. Okay, to get you attention, or maybe to get you a tangible. Maybe you want more chips, or maybe you want more money, or maybe you want any sort of tangible. Okay, so these are all, I would say, all of these behaviors function for the response class of getting you what you want. The second jar are responses that get something away from me. Okay, so when you're trying to avoid somebody or something, maybe like doing the dishes or avoiding an in-law or avoiding going to work, I could engage in all these behaviors. So hitting, biting, faking a cough, pushing somebody, calling somebody and say, hey, I can't come into work today, saying go away. All these responses function to get somebody away from me or get a task away from me. Okay, moving on. We are looking at responses that maybe make you feel good. So things like listening to music, eating chocolate, getting a massage, swinging. I would say all these behaviors have the same effect on the environment. They're making you feel good. Okay, so they would all be in the same response class. And things that take away your pain is another area, another function we'll talk about. Okay, so all these behaviors are in a response class. If you're hot, using a fan. If you have a swollen ankle, using ice pack. A headache, you're taking Advil. Taking a nap if you're tired. These are all behaviors that fall into the response class of taking pain away. So this slide just looks at not focusing so much on all these individual behaviors, but looking how they can all fall into certain response classes. Therefore, when we look at our interventions, we're going to really focus on the reasons behavior happens and not so much on those specific behaviors. All right, this is a must-know slide. At Total, we use the acronym SEAT, S-E-A-T, to put our different functions into clear and easy categories. Each letter can be looked at as a cause for behavior to occur, or behaviors that fall under these different response classes. The first in the SEAT acronym is that some behaviors serve a sensory need for somebody. The E stands for escape. Some behaviors that our clients do serve a way to escape or get away from somebody. A stands for attention. Some behaviors that somebody does get that person attention, and that's why we do them. And some behaviors get us a tangible. So there's your sensory, escape, attention, tangible, or your acronym SEAT. And that's what we're going to use when we are looking at functions. We're going to look at a behavior and we're going to pinpoint it to whether the The function of that behavior falls into a sensory category, an escape category, the attention or the tangible category, or the response class. Let's predict behavior. So this slide should make you feel really smart. The more often a behavior meets its need or meets its function, remember the functions are sensory, escape, attention or tangible, or seat. The more often the behavior meets one of those functions, the more often it will occur. That makes sense. So what is the probability that this behavior will give me what I need? Okay, and that's how I select behaviors across different environments. I'm going to do the behavior that works best for me. So let's see if you can predict what will happen in this example. So our behavior, let's start off with hitting. Okay, so I have a client and he hits for juice. And when he hits mom for juice, he gets the juice about 30% of the time. When he hits dad for juice, he gets the juice 100% of the time. When he hits his teacher, because he wants juice, the teacher never gives in to him. So 0% of the time he gets juice when he hits the teacher. All right, so let's also look at the behavior of asking, can I have juice please? With mom, asking appropriately gets him juice about 80% of the time. Dad, it gets him juice about 10% of the time. And we're not saying dad is a bad guy. We're just saying when the client says, hey dad, juice please, maybe the dad says, oh, hold on, I'll get it to you in a little bit after I'm done cooking, just wait a second. Okay, so when we do that and make the client wait, they're more likely to resort back to the behavior that works more effectively for them, such as hitting. Okay, so with dad, asking appropriately maybe only gives him juice 10% of the time. When he asks his teacher for juice, she's going to give him the juice 98% of the time he asks. So looking at these numbers, you can predict what's going to happen next time. So tomorrow, when our client's thirsty, what is he going to do? With mom, he's more likely to ask appropriately because that behavior works better for him than hitting. If dad's in the room, he's more likely to hit for juice. That behavior is more effective for him. With the teacher, same thing as mom. More effective to ask for juice appropriately. You just predicted behavior by looking at the function of behavior and how often its need is getting met. You should have already had some review for the antecedent behavior consequence chart. This is found in our data collection PowerPoint. But just a quick review, what an ABC chart gives us is an idea of what the function could be. So what you do when you're filling out an ABC chart is you write what happens prior to the behavior occurring. Okay, you talk about the behavior, and then you write about how people reacted to that behavior in the environment. And really what we're looking for is patterns to see what is going on in the environment and how is that affecting somebody's behavior. What is triggering the behavior and how somebody's reacting to it are all going to give us an indication of whether the behavior is functioning for sensory, escape, or tangible. ABC data collection, it's called descriptive data because it describes what is happening around the behavior. The before the behavior is called our antecedent, so that's our A column. The B column is our behavior, and that's where you're using your measurements. So you can be talking about frequency, you can be using percentage of opportunity here, you can be talking about duration, all of those things in the data collection PowerPoint. And after the behavior, you're going to write the consequence. So we're looking at, gives us a really good indication of how the environment, that antecedent in that behavior, or that consequence rather, is affecting somebody's behavior. What is triggering, and what is the behavior getting from its environment that's making it continue over time. So here's an example of a ABC chart. Antecedent behavior consequence. The first column, antecedent, is what happened before the behavior. So what's prompting that behavior? This example says a teacher has asked a student to move from the computer to a work desk. Next, you would put out what does the behavior look like. So that's the form part of our behavior, and that's going to give our measurement of behavior. So the client becomes aggressive, grabbing, hitting others. Lastly, the consequence. What happens after the behavior? Okay, and that's going to tell us whether or not the environment is reinforcing or punishing that behavior. So the student was allowed to stay put until she calmed down. So by filling out this ABC chart, we can look at the environment and say, hey, we're not going to focus so much on what the actual behaviors are, but that the consequence could be reinforcing the behavior, and therefore the behavior is likely to happen again, because in this example, the client was allowed to stay put until she calmed down. Okay, if behavior works for us, we're likely to do it in the future. Next, we're going to specifically look at our different functions, starting off with sensory. Sensory behaviors is a class of behaviors that work to get us something that feels good. It gives us a sensory need. So, a class of sensory behaviors. Sensory behaviors are called automatic behaviors because it happens within somebody's own body. It doesn't take somebody else engaging in a behavior to get that person what they want. So reinforcement occurs without another person. Doing the behavior gives us some sort of internal relief or stimulation. These are some examples. So scratching a bug bite is automatically reinforcing. Okay, it doesn't take another person to do, but it's a behavior that occurs and will continue to occur if the person is getting relief from scratching. If you have a headache, taking an Advil or some sort of medicine is automatically reinforcing. Taking a shower, if you're stinky, that gets rid of the smell. It doesn't take another person to tell you to shower, hopefully. By doing that, you get rid of your own smell, and showering, if you continue to shower over time, we can say that showering is reinforcing for you, and that would fall into that sensory behavior category. Turning on the light, you walk into a dark room. All right, doesn't take another person to mediate you turning on the light. You turn on the light, and that behavior will continue over time to get you what you need to be able to see. Things like listening to music or sitting in a rocking chair or swinging, those are all things that give us internal sensation, and those behaviors continue not because somebody else is telling us to do them or not because somebody else is giving us something. It just creates internal stimulation or relief for us individually. Okay, taking out the trash, similar to showering. If it's smelly and you take out the trash, what you're doing is you're alleviating that smell or that stimulation from your environment. Continuing with sensory reinforcement, or the class of behaviors that function for sensory. It occurs when a behavior gets a person something as a result of your own actions. So no one else is involved in any way. There's some examples of automatic sensory reinforcement here. One, a boy pours his own juice, glass of juice. Here, the behavior produces its own reinforcement by the fact that he got what he wanted. There is no one else that was around. Nobody else provided him the reinforcement. He just received reinforcement from drinking the juice. Okay, that would provide sensory input. Maybe a child hand flapping. Okay, for personal enjoyment, or what we call self-stimulation. A child is turning on an iPhone to play a game. The child's behavior of turning on the computer or the iPhone gets them access to that, and there's nobody else that is needed. So watching a movie or watching videos on the iPhone would fall into this sensory reinforcement category if there's nobody else involved. Autism and sensory behaviors. People with autism use a variety of sensory behaviors, so this produces automatic reinforcement for them. And the challenge to saying that a behavior functions to create some sensory need is that you have to rule out the other functions. So we don't automatically go into a situation, look at a behavior that looks like it could look like a sensory behavior, and say that the function is sensory. We need to rule out that the behavior is not occurring because for escape or attention or a tangible first, and then look at the sensory function. So something like headbanging, it may look like it's creating some sort of sensory input, but maybe it's actually functioning for attention. So we would want to rule out attention, and this is what your supervisor or BCBA would do, is rule out these functions to determine whether or not that behavior is sensory. Or playing with spit on a table, that might be a behavior that looks like a sensory behavior, but maybe it's actually functioning for escape from a task. Okay, so things that could be sensory behaviors, what they could look like that we see spinning, we see hand flapping, maybe humming or some sort of vocal stereotypy such as continued laughing. You might see picking scab, that could be a sensory behavior, rocking in a chair, maybe lining toys up. And the problem with this is that these behaviors with the population we work with, our special needs population, it can interfere with learning and paying attention. If you can't pay attention, if somebody's engaging in these behaviors continuously, they're not attending to their environment and they're not learning like a typically developing child would. If a behavior is determined to have a sensory function or create automatic sensation for a client, then your supervisor would put together a plan that could include some of these treatment options. One might be to increase the range of interest for the client. If a client is engaging a lot of stereotypical or sensory behaviors, they might not be learning from their environment different or attending to different stimuli in their environment. Therefore, their interest might be very restricted. So one of the first things we might do is engage in techniques to increase the range of interest that a person might have. Also to teach them to play with peers. Again, if you're engaging in a lot of sensory behaviors, that's automatically reinforcing, and they're technically playing with themselves or engaging with the majority of the time with themselves to create that automatic reinforcement. So teaching somebody to play with a peer and get enjoyment from playing with others. Another technique may be to block the sensory behavior and redirect back to what the client is supposed to be doing. So redirect back to instructional time. And that's going to help reduce the amount of instruction that a client misses by engaging in that sensory behavior. So the sensory behavior happens, the therapist blocks them from engaging in that sensory behavior and then redirects them back to the instruction time. Then we allow a break for that sensory behavior to occur. So we're not saying that that sensory behavior should not occur ever. We're saying that during instruction time or learning time, and that can be in a classroom environment, it can be at the dinner table discussing their day with a family member, it can just be at a playground, but anytime that they're learning something, the sensory behavior would be blocked, and then we would allow for sensory breaks at another time, the client's downtime. Teaching flexibility is also something that would be really important. So our clients that get very fixated on a schedule or a specific routine that alleviates some anxiety for them, okay, it creates maybe less sensory input. Teaching flexibility and teaching responding to change is going to assist in any sort of problem behaviors related to sensory functions. Let's move on to the function of escape. Some behaviors get us out of doing something that we don't want to do, and we as adults are very skillful at this. We're able to get out of a variety of things we don't want to do, whether it's calling in sick for work, whether it's just telling somebody, hey, I can't hang out right now, whether it's asking other people around you to do your chores. We got a lot of good skills to escape. A class of behaviors that result in escape. So behaviors that occur when there's something bad or aversive in our environment. So the client's trying to communicate to us, hell no, I don't want to do that. Get away from me. Stop asking me to do stuff. So this behavior, there's a lot of behaviors that function for escape. Some possible ones that you might see are non-compliant. So you ask somebody to do something and they simply say no. They could run away from you. That's a pretty effective way to escape a situation. You might see behaviors of aggression or other intense behaviors that occur to get somebody escape out of doing something they don't want to do. So just some other examples of antecedents maybe of what an adult could ask a child to do. Maybe a behavior like take a shower or take a shower, do your homework, clean up that mess, go to bed is a common one. And maybe something like stand in line, okay, at a store. So when these different antecedents are in place or different adult instructions, it could occasion the need for that person to escape, okay, or communicate to us, no, I don't want to do that. And if we're not following, if the client doesn't have good, appropriate communication skills, they're often going to result to problem behavior because these are very effective in getting what you want or getting you out of something. The function of escape occurs when a behavior gets a person away from doing something that they don't want to do, okay, and this involves the actions of another person. Example 1, if a boy is asking his mother to take the vegetables off his dinner plate and his mother then takes them off his plate. Here the boy's behavior requires the other person, okay, so it's not a sensory behavior, it's socially mediated, okay, and his veggies are gotten rid of. Okay, so the behavior of asking his mother is reinforced by the veggies being taken off of his plate. So he's escaping eating his veggies. If you cross the road and you're talking to somebody you don't like, so here the behavior is maybe you're walking down the street, you see somebody that you don't like approaching you, and you make a U-turn and you get out of that situation. You cross the street. Okay, so we're looking at a behavior of crossing the street, okay, that functions for escape from talking to that person that you don't want to talk to. Another example, a child is at a playground, screams at her dad that she wants to leave, and her father takes her away. So the screaming behavior is being reinforced. She does not want to be at the park, therefore she's escaping the park using screaming behavior. Okay, so those are some examples of how we can use behavior to get out of something or away from somebody we don't want. All right, let's look at another example. This is our ABC chart. Boyfriend says, clean up your Backstreet Boys CD collection on the floor. So his friends are coming over. He wants you to clean up your Backstreet Boys CD. So you engage in a behavior of just sitting there. You keep watching your TV show. Maybe it's some soap opera or Dr. Pimple Popper. Okay, and then after, your boyfriend picks up your CD cases and he puts them away. And he just wants a clean environment for when his friends come over, so he does that for you. So your behavior of not doing anything, sitting put, was reinforced. It allowed escape, and I can probably say that it will happen again in the future when your boyfriend's asking you to clean up something. Another example, you ask a client to draw a circle with a yellow crayon, and your client falls on the floor and cries, crawls on your lap, spits on you, and you say, oh, it seems like you need a sensory break. It seems like you need to calm down. Let's take a little break. Go calm down in your room. Again, the behavior of falling on the floor allowed escape, and because that behavior was reinforced, we can say that it will probably happen again in the future. So that's how you would look at an ABC chart to determine that that consequence of getting escape is reinforcing those behaviors. Here is some escape videos. So go ahead and grab a piece of paper and just write A, B, and C at the top. And I want you to fill out antecedent behavior and consequences for these particular videos.
Lila, it's time to take a nap. Time for nappy. No, go in your room. Go in your room. Come on. No, this way. You don't want nap? No nap? Okay.
Alright, so for this video, first video, your antecedent would be something along the lines of parent asking child to take a nap. Behavior in this example would be a whining type of behavior, and the consequence is that parent gives in and says, okay, you don't have to take a nap. Let's look at our second video.
Hey, I found that paper. I found that paper your teacher said you need to do. It's extra math homework for their test. Your test. So, well, you need to do it. I don't care if you want to do it.
I don't want to.
Okay, well, I don't care. Get it done.
No, I don't want to.
You know what? If you're going to act like this, then fine. Don't do it. Just fail your test.
So for the second example, it again is demonstrating that behavior can be maintained by allowing escape, or when escape is allowed to happen. So the parent asks the child to engage in homework behavior as the antecedent. The behavior was verbal refusal, tossing paper on the ground, and the consequence was that parent removed the work. When your supervisor determines that the behaviors of your client are functioning for escape, here are some treatment options that you might be trained in and be responsible for carrying out. The first is to teach a functional communication response, or for an escape behavior, you would teach that person to ask for a break or ask for an appropriate amount of time to avoid that task. Okay, so using a good form of communication to get out of something that they want to do. Another technique that you could be asked to do is called extinction. When we use extinction, we just pretty much make sure that whatever problem behavior the client's doing, so whether it's verbal refusal or falling on the ground or throwing items, that client does not get to escape what you ask them to do by using those problem behaviors. So you could be asked to give a request and make sure that client is following through, and that technique is called extinction. Another thing that you might be asked to implement is just to reduce the amount of work. So before you ask somebody to engage in a task that they would want to escape, think about it and make that task very easy. So instead of saying, pick up all the toys in your room, you might take 3 toys and put it right next to the client, right next to each other, and say, clean up the 3 toys, and then provide praise and reinforcement when that client engages in that good behavior of cleaning up. So you're making it less likely that somebody's going to want to escape by reducing the amount of work. Another technique is to use a transition item. So it's hard to move from something we really like to do to a non-preferred task, something we don't like to do. So providing some sort of item, whether it's a toy or turning on music or providing a snack during that transition time, is going to make it a little bit easier for that client to transition and less likely that they're going to want to escape. Okay, another technique is to move from a highly preferred activity. So say a client is watching the iPad and I say, okay, it's time for a shower. So moving straight from the iPad to the shower is probably going to trigger some escape behaviors. Therefore, I'm going to stick in a moderately preferred activity in the middle. So instead of going straight from the iPad to the shower, we're going to say, okay, let's move from the iPad. Let's go ahead and read a book first, and then we'll go to the shower. So you're using an item like book or ball play between that highly preferred activity and that non-preferred activity. Let's take a look at following through with a request for non-compliant behavior. This procedure is called extinction for problem behavior using 3-step prompting.
No!
Theodore, put on your pants.
No, I don't want to.
Theodore, put your pants on. Put your pants on. This. Put your pants on. Good job.
No!
Stand up. Okay, pull the back. Pull the back. Good job. Pull the front. Alright, are you done? Do you have your pants on? Are you dressed? Let me take your color.
So in this short video clip, the child was not allowed to escape getting dressed using his problem behavior. Now, if I state a directive, it's time for a nap, it increases the likelihood that escape maintained behavior or noncompliance will occur. Therefore, I need a plan. So this is using interventions, the interventions of using a moderately preferred activity, sandwiched in between a preferred and non-preferred activity, as well as a transition item into the crib. So this is an intervention for transitioning to book before taking a nap.
Lila, you want to read a book with Mommy? Come on, go to your room. Here, what's your book? You want to read it? Okay, let's go read it in your room. Go sit down. Okay, sit down. Oh, that's a good girl. Okay. The Bernstein Bears forget their manners. Oh no. Okay. Oh, and they were ready for night-night, so they packed up their car, got their toys, and said, "Good night, Papa Bear. Good night, Mama Bear." Say good night. Good night. Hey, Lila, it's time to lay in your crib. You want your baby a pillow? Yeah. Baby, baby. Oh, good girl. Come on. Oh, your blankie? Oh, your pillow? Oh, good girl. Good girl. Night-night.
We're going to switch a little bit to the next function called attention. So we know that some behaviors definitely give us attention, draw attention to our behavior. We have good ways to get attention, and we have not so good ways to get attention sometimes. The class of behaviors that results in attention. Behaviors occur when we are deprived of attention or there is direct attention being directed elsewhere. So this is called diverted attention. So if you are working with a client and they're not getting a lot of attention from you because you're engaged in another activity, or the parents are engaged in another activity. Often during school cases, the teacher can't give full attention to one student, so we do see a high frequency of attention-seeking behaviors in those settings. So this is a way for the kid to communicate, yo, pay attention to me, look what I'm doing. And what they're trying to do is use their behaviors to get you to react to them. Now, for attention-seeking behaviors, some forms we could see is whining, maybe talking back. That can get a lot of attention from parents. Swearing is a very strong, typically a very strong motivated behavior by attention. Yelling, and then maybe some other intense behaviors. So if the child is not getting attention by engaging in some of these less severe behaviors, we're likely to see an increase in behaviors. And the more severe the behavior is, the more attention that behavior is going to get. So we need to apply some interventions and not give full attention to severe behaviors and try to give in to less severe behavior, especially if the client's communicating appropriately that they need attention. So adults need to pay attention to good forms of seeking attention. So things like when the child's following directions, asking to help cook, or asking to help hang out with the adult, or maybe even sharing a story, even though it can be annoying. When the child is engaging in appropriate behaviors, the idea is to give a lot of attention, whereas when they're engaging in non-appropriate behaviors, giving less attention while still monitoring for safety. So here's a simple example. We're going to go back to your boyfriend. Your boyfriend hasn't called or texted for 4 hours, so that's an antecedent. And what that is a deprivation of attention. So if we see a deprivation of attention in the A column, we're likely to see attention-seeking behaviors occur. So you send crazy text, you call him 30 times, and your boyfriend calls you back and apologizes. His phone died, his aunt died, and his car died. So what we're seeing here is that this behavior was reinforced, it got attention, and therefore, because it was reinforced, it's likely to happen again in the future. Second example, you give a high five to a client's sibling. So you're diverting your attention to the sibling of the client. Client falls on the floor, cries, crawls on your lap, starts spitting. If you apologize to that client and give him a hug and say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't give you a high five, here's a high five, that behavior worked for him. The behavior was reinforced, it got attention, and it will likely happen again in the future when the attention is diverted from the client. So here's some examples where how the adult is reacting reinforces the behavior. What are some treatment options for attention-seeking behaviors? So again, this would be something that your supervisor would put together. They would determine the function is attention-seeking, and then these are some of the techniques that they might suggest. One of the main techniques is called functional communication training, and basically it's just teaching a way for the client to get attention that is appropriate. So teaching the client to say, Mom, play with me. And when the client does say that, you as the behavior specialist will make sure that Mom is giving attention to those appropriate attention-seeking behaviors. So you'll be prompting the parent or prompting the teacher, or you're paying attention to functional communication. Don't give problem behaviors attention. So the idea is to not make eye contact, to not yell at the client, to not say, no, don't do that, even if it's a behavior that we don't like to see. If we reprimand the client, it is still giving attention. So don't give problem behaviors attention. We want to ignore the behavior until you see the client do a good behavior, then provide attention. Now, we still need to monitor safety of the client, and so you're not ignoring the client, you are not drawing attention to the problem behaviors that client is exhibiting. Give fun activities to do if the parent or teacher needs to do a task. So instead of the parent or teacher just starting an activity, starting a task like maybe preparing dinner or doing laundry or working with another student, making sure the child or the client has a preferred activity that they're doing, so they're less likely to want parent attention during that time when the attention is diverted. Another type of intervention is that the attention needs to be delivered consistently. So anytime the client is engaging in a good behavior, this is called catch 'em being good. So the teacher or the parent would scan the environment, and if the client's engaging in appropriate behavior, they'd say, wow, I really like how you're sitting down. Well, I really like how you have a calm body, or you're doing your homework, whatever the task is. So that's another technique that could be recommended, is the catch 'em being good game. And like I said, avoid yelling, avoid timeouts, and avoid taking away items. All these processes give attention. Now here is attending to a good behavior. So this intervention is looking at not giving attention to the problem behavior, and then as soon as the client starts engaging in appropriate behavior, the adult giving attention to that appropriate behavior. So here's an example of what your supervisor could train you in and that you would be expected to run during a session.
You want to sit and read?
Yeah.
I like how you're smiling so nice. Peter, when Peter got home, his mother forgave him because he was so glad to see that he had his shoes and his coat. Cool?
Yeah.
Cool. I belong to 2 dolls.
In this video, we're going to see prompting of a new form of communication. So not giving attention to a whining behavior to get picked up, but when the client puts their hands together using parent prompting, then the other adult will give attention to that behavior. So as this intervention would be called extinction for the problem behavior and reinforcement for a more appropriate behavior, a more appropriate way to get attention. Good girl. Now put her down. So during your session, you're setting up trials where attention is diverted, and you as the therapist are prompting a good communication method, and then the teacher or the parent then gives attention to that behavior. Our tangible function. Our tangible function basically is going to incorporate behaviors that get us things that we want. So we all like our stuff, and us as adults, we earn stuff by going to work, by earning money, cashing in that money for things that we preferred, our preferred tangibles. So we're going to set the same things up during our session. So whether or not the client is asking for a preferred item in appropriate form, or if they're earning tokens to cash in for backup reinforcers or backup tangibles, we're going to look at different interventions to focus on the function of problem behaviors to gain access to tangibles. A class of behaviors that receives tangibles. So these are behaviors that occur when we want more of an activity or an item. We want to be told yes when we request. So if I want a popsicle and I ask for it, I'm expecting that I'll get it. And if I want 5 popsicles, I'm expecting that I'll get it. And if I don't get my popsicles, I might get upset. So this is a way for somebody to communicate, I'm not done playing with this item, or I want more of what this item is. Okay, and if we start engaging in problem behavior because we're not getting what we want, these are some of the possible forms of behaviors that we could see. We could see the client grabbing maybe from another student, or grabbing from the teacher, grabbing items that they want. We could see begging or whining. We could see tantruming. If we don't get what we want, we're likely to tantrum. Aggression, or other intense behaviors. Again, if we ask appropriately for an item and we don't get it, and we go through this hierarchy of grabbing and begging and tantruming, and those behaviors don't work for us, we may escalate to very intense behaviors. Now, the adult needs to take control of the things in the home before the client engages in these behaviors, and use those items, those preferred tangibles, as rewards. So what we're kind of doing is we're restricting access, free access to those things that the client likes, and then when the client's engaging in appropriate behavior, delivering those things as reinforcers. So things like electronics, putting restrictions on sweets or snacks or toys, and using those as, I guess, a reward or reinforcement when we are seeing appropriate behavior. Here are 3 examples of how behaviors can get you access to a tangible. So the first one is a boy asks his mother for a glass of juice. He gets the juice. It's mediated by another person, so we know it's not an automatic behavior. It's a socially reinforced behavior. So we're saying that this is the function of him asking for juice to his parent is tangible. Example 2, a girl finishes a small bag of Doritos, and this is at school for snack time. She asks her teacher for another bag. Her teacher initially says no, so the girl starts yelling and throws her books from her desk. Then the teacher says, hey, if you calm down, you can have one more bag of Doritos. You need to calm down first. So we can see here that those problem behaviors are most likely maintained by access to a tangible, because she got what she wanted after she engaged in problem behavior. The last example, a teacher or a child is crying for TV. The TV was turned off. This is pretty annoying for the parents because nobody likes to hear crying and whining. So the parent said, okay, calm down, you can have a few more minutes. And then the parent waits until the client falls asleep or their child falls asleep before turning it off. So in this example, the behavior of crying is reinforced, and we can pretty much safely say that access to tangible is the function of crying. Here is our tangible ABCs, going back to those same examples. So your boyfriend hasn't bought you a ring or a bling bling for 2 straight months. So you have been deprived of a tangible. So you send him some crazy texts and you call him about 30 times, and the boyfriend buys you some bling bling. This is actually reinforcing for him because it shuts you up for a little while. And then but we can say, because you engaged in those problem behaviors were reinforced because you got access to tangible. Second example, you pass the yellow crayon to the client's sibling. Now the client falls on the ground, starts crying, crawling in your lap, spits, and you ask him to use his words. And then you give him the yellow crayon. So the mistake here, and this is a really common mistake, is the problem behavior occurs, and then we prompt that child. So here's the problem behavior. Then we prompt the child to use his words. Okay? Well, the issue here is the problem behavior has already occurred. So you're really reinforcing the behavior of crying and falling on the floor instead of using his words. So ideally what we would do is prompt him to use his words before the problem behavior happens, okay, right here, to eliminate the chances of the client engaging in the problem behavior. And if you do that, if you catch it quick enough, then you're not reinforcing the problem behavior, and you're prompting good communication using his words, then giving him the yellow crayon. Here's some videos that demonstrate the function of problem behavior to access tangibles.
Hey, don't cry. Don't cry. It's okay. Okay. All done, Thumb.
Mama.
Here, don't cry. Here you go. Don't cry. Here's a phone.
Right. A green one.
All done, phone.
Mom, please. Mom, please. Mom, please.
Okay, don't cry. Don't cry. Here's more. Don't cry.
Please. Mama.
So in these examples, we can see that the parent is reinforcing the problem behavior. The problem behavior is maintained by access to tangibles. So we need a good intervention here. What are some treatment options for behaviors that are maintained by tangible access? So your supervisor would assess the behavior, determine that the problem behavior functions for tangibles, and then maybe train you in these particular interventions. The first one is our functional communication. So teaching a good way to ask for more tangible access. So more time, please. So just as simple as teaching a phrase. It can be a sign, it can be a picture exchange, it can be vocal communication. Giving an expectation and following through. So making sure that we tell the client ahead of time how long they'll have a tangible or how much of a tangible they will get, and then making sure, even if problem behavior happens, that we're not providing more of that tangible. So following through, if you say there's only 2 cookies, making sure even if problem behavior happens that you don't slip an extra cookie in there. Using a timer for an activity to signify the start of the activity and the end of activity. Using a visual schedule. that shows when the item is coming back. So we're likely to see less problem behavior if the client knows that they'll have access to that tangible in the near future. So using a visual to show them when it's coming back is going to help. Build contingencies. Okay, so giving access to preferred items contingent upon the client doing some work. So the client has access or ability to gain access to things that they like. You're just sticking it with its particular task. So, hey, yes, you can have more iPad. Go ahead and clean up a few books in your room. Clean up 5 books in your room, and then you get the TV. And then using a token system. So the token system is for more of a long-term earning of these tangibles. So if you engage in appropriate behaviors, you earn little stickers or cotton balls or check marks, and then you can cash them in for more time on your preferred items. So here's the intervention of teaching a good way to ask. So instead of crying to get what you want, prompting a form of functional communication. So this is extinction for a problem behavior and reinforcement for an appropriate way.
Yeah. Good girl, more. More.
Okay. Sneaky.
Good girl, more. Good girl, more. Look at you. Good girl, more. Okay, there's no prompt.
What did it say? Baby.
More.
Here's an example of using transitioning tools, which is a visual schedule showing when the video will come back to the child, and also using a timer. So we could go about and just say, hey, we're done with video time and we're likely to see a tantrum, or we can implement some of these interventions prior to the tantrum to reduce the likelihood that problem behavior will happen. Let's take a look.
Okay, you get some video time, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, look. Okay. Here's your video time.
Yeah.
Mommy's going to set a timer on the phone, so when a timer goes off, it beeps. Then we're going to eat some lunch,
Okay.
and then we're going to do Play-Doh,
Okay.
and then you get the phone back.
Oh, okay.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to start the timer. Okay, what's next?
Lunch. Lunch.
Play-Doh?
Yeah.
And then you get more.
Video.
All right, nice job. Okay, go in the kitchen.
Okay.
for today. Good job, folks. Let's review all of our functions. Summing up what we learned today, we started off talking about how applied behavior analysis is a science and how we use data and measurement and observing a behavior to see if what we're doing is making an impact on that behavior. And this includes looking at using measurement systems to look at the antecedent and the consequence to determine why the client is engaging in that problem behavior. We work on very important life problems. We work on developing life skills, and we work on developing life problems that are impacting somebody's ability to be happy, to integrate into their family, integrate into their school, and that's called social significance. So in ABA, we really work on goals that are socially significant to that client. We should know by now that you can't change behavior, but what you can do is change how you react and give instruction to the behavior. So the antecedent is before the behavior occurs, and we can modify the chances of a problem behavior happening if we change how we give our instructions to a client or the interventions we put in place before problem behavior happens. And we can also make modifications to our own behavior and how we're reacting to problem behavior. Okay, so that's in the consequence column. So we can't change the client's behavior, but we can change the antecedent and the consequence of the behavior, how we're giving instructions and how we're reacting to it. Problem behavior is a way for a person to communicate, whether it's communicating our 4 functions. Okay, particularly communication is going to come in the form of escape. I don't want to do that. Get away from me. I'm going to let you know. Attention, hey, your attention is on something else and I want you to look at me, pay attention to me. Or a tangible, hey, I'm communicating that I want more of an item or I want more of an activity. Okay, we also have our sensory function, which we talked about, that we don't really determine that a behavior functions for sensory until the rest of the functions of behavior are ruled out. So that's your supervisor's job, is to let you know which form or which function of behavior is maintaining the problem behavior of your client that you're working with. And our acronym right there is SEAT, to remember. Behavior that has worked for us in the past will occur in the future. This is called rules of reinforcement. So, you as the therapist, we want to make sure that we're giving into good behaviors and we're not giving into challenging behaviors. If we're giving into good behaviors, we're going to see those behaviors increase in the future because we're reinforcing the appropriate behaviors. If we're giving into the challenging behaviors, we're then reinforcing the challenging behaviors, and that means that they'll occur more likely in the future. And all in all, treatment that your supervisor is selecting for you to implement is based off of function. We're not treating a problem behavior, we're treating the purpose or the reason the client is communicating using those challenging behaviors.